There is an episode in Parshas Vayetze that I'd like to explore with you in just a few minutes that is very, very deep. It's very, very deep, even though it does not appear to be very, very deep. But a lot of times we know that sometimes even the most superficial stories in the Chumash have very, very deep lessons and are really a metaphor for something much deeper. The Torah talks about how Yaakov sees Rachel for the very first time in his life as he travels to the eastern land, Aram Naharayim, right? He says, Vayar in Pasuk Beis, Vayar v'hinei be'er basadeh. Behold, there was a well in the middle of the field. V'hinei sham shlosha edrei tzon rovtzim aleha kimin ha'be'er hahi yashku ha'adarim v'heben gedola al pi ha'be'er. Now, what's the story? There are 3 flocks of sheep from 3 different shepherds, and they were all gathered there waiting to have the rock removed from the well. V'nesvu shama chol ha'adarim. That when all of the flocks would gather and all of the shepherds would be there, v'golalu es even me'al pi ha'be'er v'yishku es hatzon, v'yeshivu es even al pi ha'be'er limekoma. Then the normal practice would be is that all of the shepherds would collectively gather together and pick up this very heavy stone, remove it, give their animals to drink, and put the rock back. This was a sort of a crude security system, that you needed a large group of people to remove the stone, and this would prevent robbers and thieves from being able to access the water supply. Vayomer lahem Yaakov, achai me'ayin atem, vayomeru mecharon anachnu. So he says to them, my brothers, where are you from? They say, we are from Haran. So Vayomer lahem hayetatem es Lavan ben Nachor. He says to them, do you know Lavan the son of Nachor? Vayomeru yadanu, and they say, yes, we know him. Vayomer lahem hashalom lo, and they say, is he at peace? Vayomeru shalom, v'hinei Rachel bito ba'a imatzam. And they say, yes, he is at peace. Everything's well. And here's his daughter Rachel coming with the sheep. Vayomer, and then he turns to them and he says, Hein od hayom gadol, lo eisei asef hamikneh, hashku hatzon l'churu. He says, there's a lot more, it's still well into the day. It's not yet time to bring your sheep back into the corrals. Why are you just standing here? Isn't this the time that you would normally be expected to give the flocks to drink? Let them graze, let them drink, and let them graze. Vayomeru lo nuchal ad asher yeyasfu kol ha'adarim. They said, we can't. We have to wait for all of the shepherds to gather and all of the flocks to gather. And then only then we'll be able to remove the stone, this big rock off of the well, and give the sheep to drink. Odenu medaber imam v'Rachel ba'a imatzon asher le'aviha ki ro'ahi. And while he's still speaking with them, all of a sudden Rachel comes with the sheep that are her father's, because she is a shepherd. Vayihi ka'asher ra'a Yaakov es Rachel bas Lavan achi imo v'eson Lavan achi imo. And when he saw Rachel, the daughter of Lavan, the brother of his mother, and he sees the sheep of Lavan, who's the brother of his mother, Vayigash Yaakov, he approaches. Vayogel es even al pi ha'be'er, and with superhuman strength he lifts up the rock that is upon the well. Vayashkes tzon Lavan achi imo, and he gives to drink the sheep of Lavan, that is his uncle. Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel vayisaskel l'vayev, he gives Rachel a kiss, and he raises up his voice and cries. Now, this is all a very interesting narrative, and we know that this is sort of a display of Yaakov's great inspiration upon seeing Rachel, but there's got to be more to this story. Why do we need to know all of the details of the story, and how does this contribute to our knowledge of Jewish history and the Jewish people? There are many layers of interpretation, many levels of interpretation, but I want to tell you a very deep explanation from the Sefer Eitz Hadas HaTov that was written by Rav Chaim Vital, the preeminent student of the Arizal, Rav Yitzchak Luria. And it's certainly based upon what we would call Torah Sod, or mystical interpretation of the Torah. And certainly there's a way to read all of this passage on the level of metaphor. So you have the text in front of you. I know that it's in Rashi script, so I apologize. I don't have this in any other script other than Rashi script. We're just going to read the underlined sections because it's quite a lengthy text. But let's see how he starts this off, and let's see what we can make out of the story. Vayomer lahem Yaakov v'chulei. So he says as follows, Reb Chaim Vital, B'mar'ei hanavuah amar el haroim manhigei Hashem. That this is a prophetic vision that Yaakov is having, speaking to the shepherds of Israel, referring to all future leaders of the Jewish people in every generation. Achai, me'ayin atem. My brothers, where are you coming from? Ki ein bachem koach liros tzon Yisrael b'halichasan, lahashivam b'tshuva gemura. Why is it that you lack the strength to bring the Jewish people back to where they belong, and bring them back and get them to do tshuva? Why haven't you fulfilled your task, O leaders of Israel, in every generation where the Jews have been wayward and rejected? Why haven't you succeeded in your task in getting the Jews to do tshuva? V'yomru min hagolus. And they say, well, we come from the Golus, we leaders of Israel who are in the diaspora. Hanikra Haran, and the word Haran, where they say that we come from Haran, that's a code word for Galut. Milashon Charon af Hashem. That the word Haran is from the word Charon, that God, when he is angry with the Jews, that's where he places the Jews. Misham anachnu ro'ei hador. That's where we come from. We live in a generation of rejection and of diaspora. V'lachein ein banu koach lahashivam b'teshuva gemura. And that's why, no matter how hard we try, we have been unsuccessful in getting the Jews of our generation to completely return to God. Ki ein banu yicholes lahochiach doreinu. We don't have the ability to completely and effectively rebuke our generation. That's their defense. That's their argument. Look at where we come from. We come from a diaspora. We come from an assimilationist society. We come from an oppressive society. How can you expect us? Why are you making this demand of us, Yaakov, that you expect us to bring all of your children back in tshuva? Look at the generation and the place where we are. So v'yomar lahem. So Yaakov's response to them is, Hakol talui biyedchem. He says, it's still up to you. Ki im chara af Hashem be'amo v'hichnisan be'golos hanikra Haran. He says, because despite the fact that God has placed you in Haran, which is the place of God's wrath, Hinei HaKadosh Baruch Hu rachamanim hatovim v'ragzanim hara'im. But still, God is merciful with those who are good, and He is wrathful for those who are evil. Pam nikra Lavan milabein avanos Yisrael. Because after all, God is called Lavan, and therefore Yaakov says to them in Pasuk Hey, Vayomer lehem hayidatem es Lavan. Do you know Lavan? It's a code word for God. Lavan is the being who whitens the sins of the Jews. V'hinei gam hu rachaman malei rachamim, levushe ketlag chivar midas harachamim. And after all, God is, so to speak, the merciful being who's clothed in white. Lavan, it represents whiteness and purity. Upam nikra ben Nachor hipachosios charon. And sometimes he's called ben Nachor. The word Nachor is charon, which means that sometimes God shows wrath. And therefore, God is only a reactionary God. If you can get the people to be good, then God will be good. And if you're not, then God will be bad to them. So really, it's all up to you. And that's really the inner message that is contained in this story. These shepherds that are waiting for the rock to be removed are the leaders of Israel who are waiting, who are leading the flocks of the Jewish people in every generation, and are waiting for the rock of redemption to finally be removed from the well of spring water that represents the Messianic age. We skip to the next part. We're just going to do the underlined section so that we'll be able to get through this. Vayomru lo, yadanu kol zeh, ki chachamim anu. So the shepherds, which represent the Jewish leaders, respond to Yaakov and they say, we know what you're saying. We're wise. We have this same tradition. Az sha'al lahem hashalom lo, im bishalom hu imachem im lo. And then they ask, is God at peace with you? In other words, do you feel confident that the relationship between God and Israel is a peaceful one? Is there a solid relationship? Vayomeru shalom. And they say back, yes. There is a solid, peaceful relationship between God and Israel. Ha'omnam i'efshar ligmor hashalom beino leveneinu legamrei ela ad asher Rachel imenu bito shel Hashem yisbarach yorum kola birama. But we will not be able to have a full relationship with Hashem, a complete, solid relationship with God, until Rachel imenu comes and raises her voice in Ramah, in the place where she's buried. Kemoshe kasuv kol berama nishma. As it says that Rachel's voice will be heard crying, and then when God hears the voice of Rachel, He will return the Jews back from their captivity. Uvischusa yavo ima Yisrael nikratzon, and then the flock of Israel will return back, the Jews who are called the sheep. B'zeh shekasav v'hinei Rachel bito ba'im atzon, and that's what they meant when they said, on a deeper level, and behold, Rachel is coming with the sheep. V'yomar lahem, Malachem lahamtim el tza'akat Rachel, shuvu v'heshivu es Yisrael b'teshuva v'higalu, v'hinei hein od hayom gadol. And Yaakov says back to them, why do you have to wait for Rachel to come? There's still plenty of time in the day. There's still plenty of opportunity for you to do this without waiting for the interceding of Rachel Imenu. Yes, ma'am. And therefore, we're skipping a whole bunch because he says this is representative of the whole history of the Jewish people, of thousands of years that we've been in Golus. Why do you have to wait for Rachel Imenu to be that trigger? Every generation has the ability for this redemption to happen. And if you skip down to the middle column, he says, "V'lachein atem haroim hashku hatzon v'lamdu darchei haTorah nikra mayim chayim." Teach the Jews of your generation the Torah. Give them water to drink. Teach them the Torah. V'al yedei kein yashuvu b'tshuva shalema. V'lachein re'u otam keroim ne'emanim v'al yedei kein yiga'alu. Therefore, you have the ability to do it. You don't have to wait for someone to come along and save you. The leaders of the generation should be able to do it on their own. Vayomru lo nuchal. And the response of the shepherds is, no, we're not able to. Ein hadavar talui banu levadanu, ad asher ye'asafu kol ha'adarim, shehim kol machanos Yisrael hanafutzim begolus v'kulam yachad tzrichim lashuv b'seshuva. And listen to this very, very profound response. We don't represent all the shepherds. We don't have the power yet to get the Jewish people to do tshuva, because we only represent a small portion of the Jewish people. There are other shepherds out there in far-flung lands. We have to wait until all of the sheep gather together as one nation. When the Jewish people are unified, then we'll be able to remove the rock that's on the well and be able to drink the waters of redemption. V'chasher kulam yashuvu yachad b'teshuva v'yasiru leiv ha'even mibisaram v'yutan lahem leiv basar. And it's only after all the Jews, not just this segment, do tshuva, and they remove their heart of stone, that's the stone or the rock that's depicted in the story, and they convert it, as the prophet Ezekiel says, to a heart of flesh. Az nuchal lahashkos hatzon shefa mayim chaim. Then we'll be able to give them the living waters of Torah. And then he says, Gam yermoz al mashenoda ki golu zeh shel Edom hu mipnei sinas chinam. He says, also alluded in this whole metaphor is, as we know, that the Golus that we're currently in is because of what? Sinas chinam. What is sinas chinam? The disunity, the animosity, the hostility that exists among Jews, that exists even to this day, sadly, and that we can't get along with each other. V'lochein lo noda haketz. And that's why the time of redemption is unknown to us. Kemoshe kasav kiyom nakam bilibi midah keneged midah. That God says the day of vengeance, which is synonymous with redemption, is only in my heart, says Hashem. I will never reveal it to you. Va'omer yom nakam hu murkav mishnei nakamos. Nakam min ha'umos al sheheru li Yisrael. V'nakam Yisrael kilo nigla kitzu mipnei sinas chinam kinizkar. That God says there are two vengeances that God will take on the day of redemption. One is the vengeance against the nations who oppressed you, and another vengeance is by the fact that Hashem never revealed to us when the redemption would be, because of the sinas chinam that we have demonstrated towards our fellow Jews. I have to skip to the last part, and let's go now to the third column, the last underlined section. And he says, V'nachzor elinyanenu. Let's go back to our topic. He says, Kizeh Omer ad asher ye'asafu kol ha'adarim v'yiskabetzu ligula echad b'leiv echad He says, therefore the shepherds are telling him that the redemption cannot take place until all the flocks gather together and we are prepared as one nation to be redeemed. V'yasiru sinas chinam mibnechem, and therefore Yaakov, the sinas chinam has to be removed from your children. V'lo yashuvu od lekisla, and therefore they never go back to that foolish position of self-hatred. V'yiskayim bohem v'hasirosias levaven mibisachem, and only when we're able to convert our heart of stone into a heart of flesh, az v'hishkinu hatzon mimayinei hayeshua, only then we'll be able to give to drink the flock of the waters of redemption. V'az lo yeshuva od lekisla, and therefore there will never be at that point a return to foolishness. And then we go to the last part of the story. Odenu medaber imam, and as he's in the middle of speaking to them, v'Rachel ba'a, all of a sudden Rachel shows up. Heruhu b'navua. So what Yaakov Avinu is showing us prophetically is ki keven sheyashuva b'tshuva ba'asifa echaz kenizkar tekef yiga'elu, that as soon as the Jewish people gather together, then immediately, as soon as we are able to get our act together and put aside our differences, immediately redemption will come. Lefisha hagalus haya al sinas chinam shel achei Yosef shemachruhu la'eved. As we know, and I spoke about this on Shabbos Shuvah, the whole reason, what is the source of sinas chinam? It's the hatred that that Yosef's brothers have for their brother Yosef, and they, to the point where they sell him as a slave. Ume'az hischila hasinas chinam b'Yisrael. That's the starting point of sinas chinam among the Jewish people, and it's continued from that point ever since. Yehuda v'Yosef kenizkar b'Yeshayahu, Ephraim lo yikaneas Yehuda v'chulei. And what is the redemption point? The redemption point is, as the prophet Isaiah says, when Judah no longer hates Joseph and Joseph no longer hates Judah. Uchenizkar b'midrash hanelam ve'ata shenespu kulam yachad Yisrael v'Yosef v'Yehuda hefach mima shenispardu b'mei Rechavam melech Yehuda v'Yorva mizera Yosef. And when the time of redemption is nigh, and they've changed their previous ways of Yosef being resentful of Yehuda and Yehuda being resentful of Yosef, as it was, even we know, in the times when the Jewish empire was split between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, between Yosef and Yehuda, Az Rachel ima shel Yosef takum v'tispalel aleihem v'yiga'elu. Only then can Rachel emerge from her grave and pray for all of the Jewish people. Now listen to this. This is like very, very powerful. Kamosha Kasav Kol Barama Nishma Rachel Mevakal Baneha Ki Gam Shar Hashvatim Shehisiru Sinasim in Yosef Yikru Az Kulam Baneha. When will all of the Jewish people be called Rachel's children? When we no longer have animus towards Yosef. When Yehuda no longer hates Yosef. When there's no longer that sinas chinam. He says, because how can you say that Rachel Mevaka al Baneha if her only children were Yosef and Binyamin? What about the rest of the Jewish children? The answer is that when we all come together as brothers and sisters, then Rachel is the mother of the entire Jewish people. But she cannot be the mother of all the Jewish people until we realize that we're all brothers and sisters. Right? He says, V'zesher kosav hine Rachel bito ba'a yimatzon elu Yisrael. He says, that's when Rachel will come with the sheep of Israel. Only when we eliminate sinas chinam. When all of the shepherds come together, all of the flock comes together, then Rachel can come out of her grave and cry. And with that impetus of Rachel Imenu Zechus, because of her righteousness and her selflessness in her own lifetime, as we read in this parsha, that's when the Geula will come. Ve'az, and then he says, and this is a very deep idea based on Kabbalah, Rachel ha'elyona, hanikres shchinas uzenu, ki ro'ahi es Yisrael biyosim begalus, nefutzim katzon. He says, then the upper Rachel, which is really representative of this feminine aspect of the divine presence that is with the Jewish people when we are in the diaspora, that as the prophet says, that when we sin, our mother is sent out with us. It's a reference to the aspect of the divine presence that is Rachel Elyona, the higher Rachel, this personage as the divine presence of Rachel. Gam hi tikra la HaKadosh Baruch Hu kama shekasav kol berama nishma ad Yaakov Yisrael Sabahu Hashem Yisbarach. And therefore, then it'll be time for Rachel, the feminine aspect of the divine presence, to call out to Yaakov, which represents God himself, Al Yedei Tza'akas Rachel Yasiris Leiv Ha'even Nigaf Me'al HaBe'er Hi Hashchina Kenizkar. And then Hashem will be able to help us remove the rock that is on the well, and that'll be the beginning of the redemption. Vayishakes Son, and he'll give Yaakov Avinu, which represents Hashem himself, will give to drink all of the Jewish people from the wells of redemption. And then, when Yaakov sees Rachel, there'll be a reunification of the divinity itself. The divinity in Golus will be reunited with the Hashem's divinity over Yerushalayim. Hashem will become one. There'll be a reunification of God, a reunification of the Jewish people, and the rock will never be placed back on the well ever again. So just to wrap it up, first of all, I find this to be very inspiring. In other words, the poetics that are contained in this metaphor. But the idea of this whole story on a much deeper level, on a metaphorical level, al derech remez, is that this whole story of Yaakov Avinu is Yaakov calling out to all the shepherds of Israel. You've got all of the sheep of Israel in your hands. Why can't you do what you need to do in order to remove the rock, in order to bring redemption? And they say, no, we need all of the sheep together. We need all of the shepherds together. We need everyone together in order to be able to have the power to remove the rock. Because only when we're all together will Rachel Imenu come and cry on behalf of us, and only then will we have the strength to remove the rock. And you, Hashem, will see our coalescence, our unity, and you'll help us remove the rock as well. So that's what we have to strive for. The key to our redemption, as is in the story, as is manifest in all of the stories throughout Tanakh, is an elimination of sinas chinam, a coming together of all of the shepherds and all of the sheep of Israel. So whether you're a shepherd or a sheep, it doesn't matter. Everyone's got to come together, and only then will we have the koach, together with Hashem, to remove the rock off of the well and to be able to drink the sweet waters of redemption. We should be zocheh to see this very, very soon. But God willing, it should happen speedily in our days. Have a great day.